The immigration enforcement operations in the metro we've seen are impacting schools, also childcare settings as well. In St. Paul, there are and have been some efforts to try and protect children, families, and staff, some of whom are not leaving their homes out of fear of being detained by federal agents. Local counties, cities, and police, of course, have limitations on how they can navigate this situation with federal law enforcement. So what can community members do? Joining me now is Celeste Finn, Executive Director of Big Wonder Childcare in St. Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you saw a problem here, you took action, and you did it by kind of going through the city of St. Paul. Walk us through how you've been doing this.
Sure. Last week a colleague wrote to the city council asking for clarity on if the St. Paul police could come to childcare centers if ICE was acting unlawfully or dangerously. I think it goes without saying that at childcare centers, we need to have emergency preparedness and risk reduction plans. We need to make sure all the children and families in our care are safe, and we need to plan for the worst. An aide responded to my colleague and said that it was murky if St. Paul police would come, and they asked for some patience as they tried to figure this out. That response raised a lot of red flags for me and made me really concerned. So we began organizing residents, families, providers to start speaking out to encourage greater clarity on what they could provide. We were able to organize a meeting with the police chief, and that provided a lot of clarity for what they could or couldn't do. They can't interfere with ICE, but they can observe and they can inform us if it is indeed an ICE agent outside our doors or attempting to get into our doors, and they could clarify if they had a judicial warrant. That did certainly help me get some clarity on what actions I could take to make sure my childcare center was safe, and help provide some clarity, because something that a lot of us are struggling with is if our children should be allowed to play outside during this time. So that was helpful. What we're asking now of the city, though, is to pass a separation ordinance that would give greater legal footing to the city of St. Paul and greater clarity to residents of St. Paul for if St. Paul police are aiding and assisting ICE agents, and if they can come and provide support if we need it.
And so there are a couple of things going on here. It sounds like you've gotten some clarification of some of the messaging and the policy. It sounds more like you're looking for a kind of accountability from local leaders, right? To make sure that the messaging and the policies are communicated to everyone. And then also, you know, when you talk about, so today you're going to be actually speaking in front of the council a little bit later during their meeting today. So specifically, you know, I think people look at this and go, well, it's tricky because we know that there are these separation ordinances. What is it that you're really hoping for here? What's your goal in this?
Yeah, so on December 11th, Minneapolis already passed their separation ordinance, and it made it really clear that city officials cannot assist with federal agents, right? It made it so that they couldn't park on city parking lots. Some of the things that I will be hoping for is if someone's injured by ICE, that St. Paul police could provide medical assistance. So just, there are real limitations legally for what they can provide, and I recognize that, and I think that's fair, but I also think that we can give ourselves greater position to keep our residents safe and not to aid and assist ICE agents in St. Paul.
And Celeste, what are you seeing or hearing from other directors or families, you know, specifically, I guess, in St. Paul when it comes to ICE operations, childcare centers?
Yeah. We have not had any ICE activity or needed to go on lockdown at my childcare center. I was meeting with 2 directors last week, and in both of those meetings, directors had to leave urgently to go on lockdown because ICE was outside their doors. And that creates a lot of tension and fear. And we need to protect the physical safety of children and their emotional safety. So we don't want them to be witnessing anything that will be traumatic. And so I also have talked to families who are patrolling outside Spanish immersion schools because they have been heavily targeted in St. Paul. So every morning, even during these frigid weathers, there are families and residents volunteering outside to protect those kids and the staff there. I also have heard from a parent that was patrolling that ICE will repeatedly circle around and shout at them and then record the observers that are outside. Obviously, that activity heightens my concerns and fears about the safety of children and childcare centers. So those are some of the concerns that we have as childcare providers. Obviously, of course, staffing a childcare center during this time is also extremely difficult. Some directors I've spoken to said their staffing is down by 50%.
Yeah. And so, again, you're going to be speaking in front of a city council in a few hours, and already some, I think from your perspective, some progress made here on shoring up some of the language and clarity, even if it doesn't end sort of in the big picture the way that people would want from your perspective. It sounds like you're getting some clarification there. I'm curious about just we as a child care executive director, somebody who is, working with these families, and you spend a lot of time with these children, how are you kind of navigating this from kind of the human perspective of, these children are not in a position where they can understand, anything that's going on around them. I guess, what's the communication like, in your communities?
Yeah, so I did share with my families some of our updated safety protocols and what we would do and how we would inform families if ICE was here to the best of our ability. As far as talking with children, I work with children who are 2 to 5. At that age, it's not developmentally appropriate to share with full clarity or transparency what's happening or the real dangers that are there. Children can't really comprehend between ICE acting out on the streets or ICE being inside their home. So they live often in kind of a fantasy land. Obviously, they believe in so many magical things. And so, which is beautiful, but it also means that they can be easily traumatized and harmed by ICE activity. And we know that many children who have observed things or their parents have been detained are in a lot of emotional turmoil right now.
All right, we'll continue to keep in touch with you. I know Minneapolis, as you said, they have their separation ordinance. They revised it. It went from something like 1 page to 6 pages. We're able to get really specific with the language. So we'll see if something similar here happens in St. Paul as well. Thank you for your time today, and we'll keep following what's happening in St. Paul.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, take care.